All right, I'm gonna admit a couple more folks and then I think we'll get started here. Hi, everyone. Welcome if you're just joining us. All right, we are gonna get going, and excuse me if I have to pause for a second to let a few more people in. This class was really popular, no surprise. Mike is a wonderful guy and cocktails are delicious and a great way to pass the time these days. So we're so glad you're all here, and we might have a couple more trickle in as we go as well. So thanks for joining us tonight, everybody. Some of you might recognize my face. My name is Anna Richardson, and I'm the programs director at The Good Acre. We're a nonprofit food hub located in Falcon Heights, and our mission is to connect and strengthen farmers, food makers, and the community through good food. So since the pandemic began, our community-facing programming has ventured into the digital space, which is where we are tonight. We're really excited to be offering, admitting some more people. We're really excited to be offering these online Discover events, and thank you to all who made a donation when registering. Your support helps us to fund our programs that support small farmers and food makers in our region. You can learn more about the work we do by visiting our website at thegoodacre.org. So I'd like to introduce you to our main speaker tonight. His name is Mike Augustyniak, and Mike joined WCCO TV in September of 2008 as the meteorologist anchoring weekday morning and noon newscasts. Today, he's the director of meteorology for the station and provides forecasts for weekday noon and weekend morning newscasts. He's a certified broadcast meteorologist, the professor of broadcast meteorology at St. Cloud State University, and the commissioner for professional affairs of the American Meteorological Society. Meteorological, Mike, I bet you get that a lot. The nation's oldest and largest professional society for meteorologists. In 2013, he created Mike's Mix, this is kind of a riff on that, an Emmy-nominated segment highlighting local bartenders and craft spirits and cocktails, the first and only such regularly scheduled segment in the country. Just before we jump in, a couple of quick kind of housekeeping notes. So I mentioned before we did this as a meeting rather than a webinar, so that if you choose to have your video on and see who else is in the meeting, you can do that. So there are a couple different view options available. If you want to pin Mike's video and just kind of see him and what he's doing in a larger video than everyone else, you can click in the little triple dots that'll show up when his video shows up and choose pin video, and then you'll just get to see Mike the whole time. But of course, you also have the option of doing grid view, so you can see kind of everybody mixing their cocktails along with Mike. We'll be sending a recording of this webinar out tomorrow morning. And if you have any questions for our guest speaker along the way, just enter them in that Q&A button down below, which you'll find in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. And my colleague Sarah will be monitoring the chat for any questions you may have, most of which we'll save for the end, but if there's one that's super relevant and we want to ask it along the way, Sarah will take care of that too. So that said, please do keep yourself muted, just because we have a lot of folks with us tonight, which we're really excited about, but don't want to hear too much house background noise of too many people all at once, so we can follow Mike's cocktail mixing. The last thing I'll mention is that today is Give to the Max Day, as your email inbox may have reminded you, and the Good Acre is raising money to recharge our Farmer Relief Fund. Sarah just shared the link to our donation page in the chat, and she'll do that again later. If you feel moved to give, we thank you. So without further ado, I'll kick it off to you, Mike.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight. Appreciate it. This is my kitchen. This is not a television set. I don't go to the television studio all that often anymore because of COVID-19. Our whole goal is to make sure we can stay on the air and keep doing newscasts if somebody gets sick. So that's why we are so spread out, even though I get that question a lot. Why are you still at home? Well, I don't get to make that decision. My bosses make that decision, and it's a strategic move. So we also have become quite familiar with Zoom these days, and I'm glad that you could join us all this evening. So I want to just sort of do kind of a top-level overview here of what this class is going to be about tonight, and we will move on pretty quickly from there to make 3 cocktails. I also want to point out that if you do have questions about what's that ingredient or which one of these gin types do you like, anything like that, you can put them in the chat. I may not actually see them. I have pretty good eyesight, but the type is pretty small. So Sarah will probably flag them to me as we head throughout the course. And you can always find me online too. If something pops into your head, a question later on after we've signed off. I'm easiest to reach on Twitter. You can also get me on Instagram. My handles in both of those are just my name, @Mike_Augustyniak. And don't worry if you can't spell it, Google can, so you can find me on Google. All right, so I titled this class Flexible and Classy Holiday Cocktails. And the whole reason I put flexible as the first word is because this is a weird year. Like, I'm not exactly sure what Thanksgiving is going to ultimately hold. Nobody knows what Christmas and Hanukkah are going to hold. So the whole point, or the whole idea behind this class, is to have enough flexibility that if you do make something and people don't show up, maybe you don't have to throw that away. Maybe you can reuse it in a different way. If you think you're going to have a whole bunch of people and it turns into just one or two, or if you think you're only going to have one or two and it turns into a whole bunch of people. Some of these cocktails are easy to kind of scale up, and so few ingredients that if you had to make a bunch of them at once, that wouldn't necessarily be a problem, even on short notice. The other thing we're going to talk about is flexibility in the kitchen in terms of the tools that we use. Now, I have been doing this segment long enough that I have a whole drawer full of stuff. In fact, this is one of 3 liquor cabinets I have in my house. I had to keep expanding and expanding. I don't expect that you'd have that much stuff. In fact, you probably shouldn't have that much stuff. So in that sense, what we want to do is tell you what you can use around the house, that you have around the house already, in place of buying mixing tins or a measuring device. It's called a jigger. And so we'll start with that. Again, some of you may have this. This is called a Boston shaker, and there are several different types of these. This one here has a smaller tin and a larger tin that fit together. And when you put ice in here, there's a chilling effect that makes the air makes an airtight seal as the air shrinks because it gets colder. So you can shake this, then you hit it, they come apart, you pour your cocktail. This is pretty common. I bought these on a website called cocktailkingdom.com. They're from a company called Carico, and it's a Japanese company. They are, I think this whole thing was $12. So if you don't have one, but you want to get one, this will not break the bank. If you don't have one of these, or you don't want to get one of these, a water bottle can work, a bike water bottle. Anything that has a top on it that you can close and shake, and a mouth big enough that you can actually fit ice cubes in there, that'll work. If it doesn't have a strainer on it, no problem. But this actually does. You just open the squeezy bottle part and you can squeeze your ingredients into your glass without having to strain ice out. This also works. This is my coffee mug, which is fairly clean. And that's important because you don't want any weird flavors in there. Alcohol can remove coffee stains when water and soap may not necessarily be able to. So just keep that in mind. But this too, you can put the seal, close the seal, and then you can pop the top and strain your ice out. Easy way to fix the I don't have the tools problem. Mentioned the Boston shaker. In fact, some of the Boston shakers you guys have at home may have a top that fits on here. In fact, probably should have grabbed this to begin with. I have one too. It looks like this. Top comes off, and then there's a built-in strainer in there. These are absolutely fine. I don't like them as much though, because after you make a drink or two, especially if they have any kind of sugar in them, these tend to stick together. And I have a heck of a time trying to get them apart until I wash them. So these shaker tins here are a little easier to break apart. You also may have seen these without the small tin and with a pint glass on top. Just be careful with those because sometimes those can break. That's why I prefer these. In terms of straining, this is called a Hawthorne Strainer. This one is from OXO. I think I probably got it at Bed Bath & Beyond. It was a couple bucks. They sell really fancy ones too. Cocktail Kingdom does, other websites do, but this just fits into the top like that. You pour, keeps the ice inside. You have a great cocktail. We all probably know how to get juice out of a piece of citrus fruit. You can just squeeze it if you're really strong. This here is one of the juicers that I use. It's called the Chef and Fresh, which is a dumb name, but it's a great juicer. And I got this off Amazon, again, I think for about 12 or 15 bucks. It's been in the dishwasher a million times. It's held up really well, works great. But again, brute force strength, if you need to, you can always just cut a lime or a lemon in half, squeeze it. And I tend to use, if I do that, either a little tea strainer or I use my fingers to try to catch some of the seeds should they come through. Few other things that we'll use tonight that you don't necessarily need to have, but I do because I'm a nerd. This is a peeler, kind of like a Y peeler. You guys, probably a few of you subscribe to the awesome Good Acre Farm Share box, and so you're probably used to peeling vegetables. The one I have here is from a company called Titan, and it's got little serrated teeth there on the peeler, and this works pretty well to do what we call rips of garnish, or one very special garnish that will be coming up in our second cocktail called a horse collar garnish, and I'll explain why it's called that coming up. Another tool that you're going to see me using tonight is this. This is just a bar spoon. It's equal to approximately 1/8 of an ounce, but we don't eat things off of it. What we do is we put it into a mixing tin or a mixing glass and stir. And you might be able to see here that it sort of looks like a screw. And that's so that when you're stirring, if you put it properly in between your fingers, it will actually move around smoothly in there. You don't need one of these. If you don't have one, that works just fine. And then let's see, is that it? Yeah, I think that's it for the tools at this point. Looks like we're good. Okay, just checking the questions. We're all good. Awesome. So, in addition to picking things that were sort of flexible and easy to change around if you needed to from a cocktail perspective or from a size perspective, I did want to pick a few different types of cocktails. I know that everybody's favorite cocktail is different. Some people like sweeter, some people like more what we call spirit forward, which is also known as booze heavy. Some people like a little more acidic cocktail. Every type out there. I chose 3. If you don't like any of these 3, that's not going to hurt my feelings. There's probably a cocktail out there for you. So tonight we're going to start with a Clover Club. Now that cocktail is, it's pretty old, but it's not the oldest out there. It was first invented in 1901, or at least it was first published in 1901. And that recipe is pretty simple and includes something that a lot of people are afraid of, and that would be a raw egg. Now, I know as kids, a lot of us maybe licked the beaters when our parents were making cookies or something like that, and we all managed to survive. But somehow when you're an adult, when you think about drinking an egg, or an egg white in this case, that freaks a lot of people out. I completely understand. I will say that I have been using raw eggs in cocktails for years, and I have never gotten sick. I'm not probably going to pay your medical bills if you do, but the threat is very, very low, particularly when you add it to something that has alcohol in it, which does a pretty good job at sterilizing things. So this is one of the main ingredients in the Clover Club cocktail. Why, Mike? Why do we put an egg in here? Well, an egg has kind of this, well, you've had meringue, right? Where you whip up egg whites. It's a similar story when you put an egg white into a cocktail. It adds this light, velvety mouthfeel. And in addition, it brings together ingredients. It does what we call emulsify ingredients, which means bringing in ingredients of different textures and acidity levels together. It helps kind of bind everything together. So that's why the egg white goes into the Clover Club cocktail. It also happens to be a very, very pretty cocktail. It contains raspberry syrup, which is what I have here. I put the instructions on how to make raspberry syrup on the recipe list that I created. But if you guys didn't get that or didn't have a chance to see it, what I want to do now is actually share with you. Oh, I can't. My host has disabled participant screen sharing. That's okay, Sarah, I forgive you. I was going to show you how to make this, but essentially what you do is you boil equal parts water, sugar. Oh, I am the co-host now. You put together equal parts sugar, water, and raspberries. I happen to use frozen raspberries because I saw them on sale a few months ago and put them in the freezer. In this particular case, frozen raspberries work just as good as fresh raspberries, although if you happen to have some fresh raspberries from the Good Acre, that's always a good idea. So I started with simple syrup. That's just equal parts water and sugar in a saucepan. Didn't even need to bring it to a boil to get this clear look after adding the sugar. If you stir it regularly, relatively frequently, you'll end up seeing this clearing to the water as the sugar dissolves pretty quickly. This is as I added my frozen raspberries. Now I know in the recipe I said 8 ounces. In this case, each packet of raspberries is only 6 ounces. So I just did 6 ounces of frozen raspberries, 6 ounces of water, and 6 ounces of granulated sugar. After stirring that for about 5 or 10 minutes, I ended up with this. The raspberries start to break down into a pulp, and then I took it off the heat, turned it off, and let it cool a bit. I put that into a strainer set over just a measuring cup and smooshed out all of the juice from those raspberries that I could. And I ended up getting, with my 6 ounces of water, 6 ounces of sugar, and 6 ounces of raspberries, about 12 ounces of volume. So that's more than enough, even if you want to make a bunch of these, because each drink only uses 3/4 of a cup at this point of raspberry syrup. Now, I mentioned flexibility. What happens if you make this and people don't show up, or you don't end up using it all? You can definitely use that raspberry syrup on pancakes. It's a little bit thinner than maple syrup will be, but it will taste pretty good. You could also, if you don't want to go through the trouble of making that, you could make you could make this cocktail with raspberry jam. So just go into the fridge, take out some raspberry jam, and jam tends to be a little bit sweeter than this 1-to-1 simple syrup that I made. So you might want to use a little bit less than the 3/4 of an ounce, but you can experiment a little and see how your palate adjusts to the idea of jam instead of raspberry syrup. We also have lemon juice that's going to go into this drink, and that 1 egg white. So I'm going to stop talking right now, and we're actually going to get to it. And in fact, I have managed to set up here a second camera, which is not a great angle for me because I have really been enjoying myself and snacks during the quarantine period, but I don't care. I want to show you guys as best as I can. All right, so another trick, especially if you're just starting out. When you're adding stuff to the shaker tins, add the cheap stuff first, because if you mess up measuring or you slip and you pour too much in, you don't want to have to throw out the booze, because the booze actually is the stuff that costs the most money. One other thing I want to mention, well, actually, you know what? Let me start with this first. We'll start with the lemon juice. So I'm just going to cut this guy in half. And we're going to do 3/4 of an ounce of lemon juice. Now, the jigger that I have, I'm not sure if you can see in there, there are little etched in markings. And that tells you how much each level is. A lot of people ask me, Mike, how much does my jigger hold? And if they're not labeled, you don't know. There's not a standard size. Sometimes the big guy isn't, well, I've seen anything from 1.5 ounces to 1 3/4 ounces, and the little guy is 3/4 of an ounce or an ounce. I don't know. That's why I bought this one. I know what this is every time. This also came from Cocktail Kingdom. It's nice and heavy, and it's hard to knock over if it's on an uneven surface. So I recommend this one. Each little line in there is a 1/4 ounce. So this one goes 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, and then right to the top full is 1 ounce. And this side is 1.5 ounces and 2 ounces. So we're going to use the little side here, and we're going to squeeze out 3/4 of an ounce of lemon juice. Maybe if you grew up going to TGI Fridays and you saw those really cool guys flipping the bottles and what we call free pouring, which is not measuring, that might look really cool in the movies like Cocktail, but that's actually a terrible way to make a really good drink. Just like cooking, you need, well, particularly baking, you need to measure really, really carefully. So if you think it makes you not look cool when you're measuring, I would strongly disagree with that. At least I wouldn't want to drink any of your drinks if you weren't measuring. All right, so there's 3/4 of an ounce of lemon juice. We're going to do 3/4 of an ounce of our raspberry simple syrup here. By the way, if you do make this and it sits in the fridge for a little while, you're going to see some goopy stuff rise to the top. That's the pectin that's in a lot of fruits, but in particular in raspberries and also in pineapple. Don't worry about that. That's great. You can remove it if you want, or just shake the bottle up, redistribute the pectin. It'll smooth out once it comes up to room temperature, or at least gets a little bit warmer. All right, so that's where we're at so far. If you're making this along with me, good for you. If you just want to watch, that's awesome too. No problem there. Next up, we're going to do our egg white, and we're just going to put the whole egg white in there. So what I'm going to do is try to properly get just the white of the egg and not the yolk.
Quick question for you, Mike.
Yes, ma'am.
Was that 3 ounces of lemon juice or 3/4 ounces lemon juice?
3/4 of an ounce. If I said 3 ounces, I apologize.
That's all right. Thanks for the clarification.
Yep. Wash my hands. Okay. So that's almost everything. And now we want to do the gin. And I mentioned how the gin, or I mentioned how we would be vamping and coming up with different ways to use what you have on hand. Well, in this particular case, I happen to have on hand some lovely Far North Spirits Gustav Navy Strength Gin. And maybe you've not heard of Navy Strength Gin before, or maybe you have, but you don't know what it means. Navy Strength Gin just means it's stronger than the regular proof. What's proof? Proof is just the amount of alcohol that's in what you're pouring by volume. So if you want to know the percentage of alcohol, you divide the proof in half. So for example, regular gin is generally 80 proof. Divide that in half. That means 45% by volume is alcohol. The rest is probably water. Navy Strength Gin, at least this particular case, is 114 proof. And that's the minimum proof that Navy Strength Gin has to be in order to be called Navy Strength. Now, why would you want a stronger booze? Well, there are some recipes that call for it. This tends to stand up a little better to stronger, bolder flavors than regular gin does. And also, this type of gin can get you drunk faster. So be extra careful, okay? So you generally don't want to substitute Navy Strength Gin in for a recipe that has regular gin, because it's not gonna taste right, and it's also gonna get you a little bit tipsier faster than you probably wanna be. Again, based on what the recipe is. So Mike, you have Navy Strength Gin, but the recipe calls for regular gin. What are you gonna do? Well, you notice before I mentioned that, talk about how much alcohol by volume, a certain percentage is ethanol, which is the alcohol that we drink, and the other percentage is generally just water. I'm gonna water this down. That's what happens at the distillery. A lot of these distillates come off the still at a proof that's higher than they end up being bottled. And that goes for all spirits, all distillers. And then it's up to the distiller to properly, and this is a legal requirement, by the way, by the government, you have to proof, what they call proof it down, or essentially thin it out with high quality water to get it to the right proof. So I did a little bit of math before you guys got online. 114 proof booze to get it down to 80 proof booze, which is what I want for this recipe. It's about 70% of the volume that's going to be alcohol, and you make up the rest of it by adding water. So for our 2 ounce pour here for this recipe, 2 ounces of regular gin, what I'm going to do is actually use just shy of 1.5 ounces of Navy Strength Gin, and then I'm going to make up the rest of the volume with water. So let me switch my camera again for you. And yes, that's cheating, but you know what? Sometimes you don't have time to go out to buy regular gin, and that's okay. Particularly because this is my class and I get to say whatever I want.
Hey,
But
Mike.
it's good. Yes.
We got a question about substituting with different alcohol. Like, could somebody use vodka instead of gin?
Absolutely. It's not going to be a Clover Club. It'll be some other drink that you can name. But if you like the way that tastes, that is absolutely okay. There are no rules, honestly.
And we will be sending out recipes afterwards. So
Got it.
if anyone loses track, don't worry, we've got you covered.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. So I'm just going to add a little bit of water to this to bring the volume up to 2 ounces. and we're good. That is going to taste exactly like quote unquote regular strength gin would, because I literally just turned it into regular strength gin. All right, so that's all of our ingredients. I'm going to get some ice. Don't skimp on the ice. Believe it or not, the more ice you put into the shaker tin, the colder it's going to get faster. And that actually prevents more dilution. You think you add more ice cubes, and so there's more water in there, and that's going to dilute the cocktail. That's actually not true. Less amounts of ice means it takes more shaking to chill it, and that ultimately leads to more melting. So what I'm going to do for this shaker tin setup is fill this little guy, the cheater tin, as they call it, about 2/3 full, even though there's only one cocktail in here. But what I'm going to do first, because there's egg white in here, is do what's called a dry shake. So a dry shake is essentially all of the ingredients without the ice. Why are we doing a dry shake? Well, because like a meringue, you want to whip up those egg whites to get them really frothy. And I'm going to crack this open here. That is what a dry shake does. If you were to add ice before, it wouldn't taste bad, it wouldn't come out wrong, but you probably wouldn't get quite as much of a froth on there. And the froth is what's part of a Clover Club. It's what makes a Clover Club so pretty. So now that we popped that open, we're going to add our ice cubes and go back in. Once the shaker tin, if you have a plastic, or I'm sorry, if you have a metal one, it's not too cold to hold, but you'll notice it gets significantly colder. That's when it's time to stop shaking and to give this guy a pour. I'm going to switch my camera again after I grab a glass. We're going to put this into what's called a coupe glass. They sell these pretty much anywhere, but essentially it's a more stable, more traditional version of a martini glass. More stable because it's not as top heavy and it's harder to knock over, but also these predated martini glasses, at least in the cocktail world. So, give you a closer view of this. And let's see, where can we go for that? How about right here? Here's a little of that. Got our Hawthorne strainer. Strain this into our chilled coupe glass. And this is even a little bit pink or red. So it's a little Christmas appropriate, but it definitely is a really, really striking cocktail. I know the color on this camera is not great. So now that I've poured it, I'm going to switch back to the better camera with better colors. And that is an awesome looking drink. So that is a Clover Club. And it's actually very, very mild. This is a very easy drinking drink. If you don't think you like gin, you may not, but this is a gin drink that you might want to try because it's really just subtly there in the background. And I know Sarah, before we came on here, she had some Far North Spirits Solvay gin. It's in that beautiful white bottle. That is a great gin to use for this. But even a stronger gin will work just fine, again, in part because of that egg white and that velvety texture. So we have one down. I'm not going to take a break. I'm just going to turn around and wash these out. Are there any questions, Sarah or Anna, that you want to ask while I'm doing that?
Doesn't look like any questions, but I did make the first one. I don't have a fancy coupe glass, so.
You don't have what?
Cheers. I don't have a fancy coupe glass, but cheers to everybody. And that is delicious, and I do not like gin, so.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has a nightmare experience or a nightmare story with some sort of alcohol. For me, before I started getting into this, it was tequila. The truth is that most of those stories start with bad decisions, drinking too much, or mixing alcohols, or in my case, just being a college kid and drinking cheap tequila. Cheap tequila will really hurt you the next morning.
It will. Any recommendations for a good garnish on this one?
Good garnish. So what you can do if you want, because hopefully you already bought these. These are Angostura Bitters. You can get these in any grocery store. You don't even need to go to the liquor store. And what you can do is, because there's such a nice frothy head on this drink, what you can do is put a couple of drops of Angostura. And I'm going to switch cameras again. A couple of drops of Angostura right on the velvety top of this drink. And we're going to try to do 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, yeah, unfortunately the light is a little too bright here, but what I'm going to do then is take a toothpick and kind of like scrape through it and stir it, and that's going to sort of make a cool little pattern with the Angostura Bitters. And that is a garnish that does not change the flavor of the drink really at all, but it does add just a little bit of visual interest. It's a little hard to see because that froth is so bright white, but that's what I would do for this drink. And that's also really, really easy to do.
Very cool. Barb, Anna's mom, also said maybe a mint leaf would look nice and would be even easier than the bitters.
Yeah, so that's red and green too. That's a great drink for Christmas if you want to do that. Absolutely. If you still have mint alive, good for you. You can also buy mint in the store, I know, but that is one of the things that I really love about having an herb garden, is that they're all such great garnishes. This time of year, I tend to forget about them though. All right, so we're about halfway through. Hopefully you've made one successfully, or you're just enjoying the show. I'm not going to drink that whole thing, although I probably could. Coming up next, the Brandy Crusta. Crusta is a weird name, makes me kind of giggle a little bit. You've probably never heard of the Crusta. Well, the last drink, the Clover Club, dates back to 1901. At least that's when it was first published, the recipe. This one dates back to the 1850s. And it was born in New Orleans, which is a great bar town, a great cocktail town, when a bartender added just a splash of lemon juice to the standard, what was called cocktail then. So back in the 1850s, there was really only one type of cocktail, and that was anything made with spirits, sugar, and water. And often water comes in the form of melted ice. That's really what an old-fashioned is, more or less. Then they started to add some bitters to that. But there really only was one style of cocktail, and everything we have seen come since then, somebody has built upon that in what was just really a trial and error situation. So the Crusta grew out of that. And the Crusta today can be recognized by this really interesting sugar rim. You've probably had a margarita with a salt rim around the glass. This one uses a sugar rim, and it's actually functional. So it's both garnish and functional, because this is a pretty acidic, pretty sharp tasting cocktail. And the sugar on the rim allows the person who's drinking to kind of offset that however much they want to by dipping a little deeper into the sugar rim if they want to. This one also uses the horse collar garnish that I was talking about. And that is another very, very noticeable visual aesthetic as part of this cocktail. So for this one, we're going to use Cognac. I love to use local ingredients, but nobody is making Cognac, and that's in part because it has to be distilled from French grapes. This is Cavassier. It's a very fine Cognac that you can find almost anywhere. My favorite Cognac in the world for mixing cocktails, though, is by a company called Pierre Ferrand. And you can find that in a lot of liquor stores, just not all of them. This one is even in the big box retailers. So Cognac is the base spirit. This one is also going to use just a little bit of lemon juice. It's going to use a rich, simple syrup made with brown sugar and some Angostura bitters. Again, another very, very easy drink to make. Brown sugar simple syrup is different than white sugar simple syrup because it uses a unrefined or more unrefined sugar as part of that mix. We know that hopefully, you know now that after that first cocktail that simple syrup is equal parts sugar and water, with the sugar dissolved in the water. Often it's done through heating, although you can let sugar sit in water for the overnight and it will likely mostly dissolve that way too. Brown sugar simple syrup, particularly using Demerara sugar, maintains a little more of a deeper earthy flavor than simple syrup using granulated white sugar. Sometimes that's what you want. You don't want the simple syrup to really even be noticed, at least as anything right off the top. But a brown sugar simple syrup has a little more molasses flavor to it, and you can sense that sort of earthy, funky undertone. And in this case, that's what we're using because we want that to actually come through. We want that to be a little more part of the foreground as opposed to the background. For me, I did not make this simple syrup because I already had this made. This is a Mexican cone sugar simple syrup. It's called piloncillo, and it is one of the not so secret anymore ingredients in the Parlor Old Fashioned, which is one of the best old fashions in the Twin Cities. You can go to a Mexican grocery store and buy piloncillo. It's called cone sugar because it comes in, it literally looks like a cone, like an ice cream cone, and it's hard packed sugar. You put that in water, equal parts in the on the stove, keep stirring it, it will melt and it will turn into this. This is the funkiest of funky brown sugar simple syrups. If this is too much for you or you don't want to go to the Mexican grocery store, Demerara sugar will work, and so too will brown sugar. Although brown sugar has a little more moisture content in it, so it won't be quite as strong as the Demerara. Regardless, again, there are no mistakes in what we do in bartending. It really only becomes a mistake if you're charging somebody $15 for a drink and you screw up the recipe. All right, so let's start with our cheapest ingredients first. Again, so we're going to do lemon juice, and this one calls for only a teaspoon of fresh lemon juice. So if you don't have a jigger, you can do the conversions between teaspoons and ounces. In this case, a teaspoon is approximately, well, it's a little less than 1/4 of an ounce. So we call that a skinny 1/4 ounce. So what I'm going to do is going to pour up to that bottom line, or actually just shy of that bottom line. And I think I probably have enough juice left in this in this lemon to reuse it. So let's see how much we get out of it. Yep, that'll do it. So there's our skinny 1/4 ounce. This is literally just a hint of lemon flavor. Put that into the shaker. We're going to do a 1/2 teaspoon of rich simple syrup. So again, there is not a lot of additional ingredients in this. 1/2 teaspoon is about 1/8 of an ounce, which is what a bar spoon is, more or less. So we'll do our bar spoon here. That's that. We're going to do 2 dashes of Angostura Bitters. When it comes to dashes, I will say that when a bottle of bitters, no matter where it's from, if it has a shaker top on it and not the eyedropper, when it's new, it will not dispense as much liquid with each shake as it does when the bottle has been opened and some of the volume has been removed. So if you're using a brand new bottle of Angostura, turn your 2 shakes into 4 because there's going to be less coming out with each shake. This is a fairly well-used bottle of Angostura, so I'm going to do 1, 2. What's in Angostura? Well, first of all, it's a secret recipe, so if I told you, I'd have to kill you. No, actually, I don't know exactly what's in here, but it's got a lot of baking spices in it. It's a lot of brown sugar, cinnamon, kind of nutmeg scent to it. All right, so that's all we have in our shaker tin right now, just a little bit. Now we're going to add the cognac, which is 2 full ounces.
Mike, for anyone who doesn't have cognac at home, this is a personal question because I don't have cognac at home.
Yes.
What would a good base spirit be to substitute that?
I have not tried, I will say that, but an aged rum, maybe a 3 to 5 year rum, something that's not clear like Bacardi, but maybe a Bacardi aged might get you close to it. You also could try, and oftentimes what people will substitute for cognac is, which essentially is French brandy made from grapes, is American brandy made from apples. I don't particularly love that substitution, but that is the more traditional substitution.
Awesome. And how much cognac was that? 2 ounces?
It's 2 ounces.
Perfect.
All right, so this is ready to go. I'm not going to put ice in here yet, though, because I want to prep the glass. This glass here that I'm going to use is kind of like a tiny coupe glass. It's very pretty. This may be my husband's that I inherited when we got married, which is really it's the only reason I married him. He's listening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make that horse collar garnish. This horse collar garnish is essentially the entire peel. It's one long peel around the lemon, trying to avoid as much of the white pith as you can. It's going to give a big long rip of lemon peel. So here, we're going to try this now, and I'm going to switch cameras again. One thing I will say about this particular peeler is it really loves knuckle skin. It will take your knuckle skin off if you're not careful. So be extra careful. But here we go. Let's see how I do this. This is not easy. So if you mess this up, don't worry. You're not alone. And if I yell out a profanity because I've grazed my knuckle, I'm warning you that could happen. All right, so we're going to go all the way around. Is this a pain? Yep, it is. But it's really, really cool looking. And it does give what's called a nose to the drink. And that means that that's what you taste is partially made up of smell. So having this, when you take a sip of this drink, your nose is going to be buried right in this. That's actually as important as any of the liquid ingredients in it. So here we go. This is what's called a horse collar. And the key to this is to sort of wet the outside of the peel and stick sugar on it. And then again, you can sort of use your tongue to take as much sugar as you want from that with each drink. So what I'm going to do actually is I think I'm just going to use, toss that lemon. So I'm just going to use water in this case. Just run this. And I did wash this lemon first. That's important since you're going to be putting it right in the glass.
Hey, Mike, as you're doing that, we had a question about doubling the recipe and if there's any specific considerations you should make in doing that. And it occurred to me that creating the horse collar would be something that you need a second lemon for. Right.
Yep. So yes, all you do is you double the ingredients. It's just straight doubling. The other thing I'll recommend is, since I had a half a lemon already cut, I used that, and then I took this from a fresh lemon. If you want to use the same lemon, peel the horse collar first, then slice the lemon in half and squeeze it. But good question. So this is wet now, and all I'm going to do is just sort of sprinkle some granulated white sugar on this. And if it doesn't all stick, I'm going to flip it over, but we're actually doing pretty well here. I'm not sure if you can see that or not. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put this inside the glass. Now that was kind of a tiny lemon, and the mouth of this glass is fairly large. But typically what you would see is that would sit a little higher up in the glass, kind of like that, and sort of give you a rimming effect with sugar and lemon. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. All right. So this is now sitting down in the glass because that's what we got to work with, and that's what we're going to stick with. Still pretty, still going to taste delicious. We're going to go ahead and add ice to our cocktail now and shake it up. This one you don't need to do a dry shake because there's no egg white in it, so we're just going to straight shake this with water or with ice. Again, make sure you put enough ice in there so that you have that really, really good chilling effect. Sometimes, if you're fancy, you don't need the Hawthorne Strainer. If you have a glass that's not this small, if you only have like one size of glass, that's fine.
Question for you, Mike. Which side of the lemon peel was it that faces the outside of the glass?
I'm sorry, say that again, Anna.
That's okay. Which side of the lemon peel faced the outside of the glass?
The outside of the peel faces the outside of the glass. So you want to
Great.
look through the glass and see the really, really pretty
Yellow.
lemon peel in theory.
Great.
Now, I'm just going to say it. I talk shit about my husband. So I believe I owe him this drink.
He requested it.
He did request it early on. If he's still talking to me, I only made one, honey. So I'm giving you all that I have.
Here.
This is my husband, Eric.
And the love of your life.
And Lola. Lola cannot
Hi,
hear.
Eric.
Hi there, everybody.
Lola cannot drink because she is only 9. There you go. That's a Brandy Crusta.
Who's got the sugar on there?
Mm-hmm.
You went all out.
I did. Well, for the class. So that's a pretty tart drink overall, but again, everybody's tastes are very individual. So if you like a tartar drink, this is one that you're really going to like.
I tend to like things on the tart side for sure.
Which is why he married me. All right.
Delicious.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye, Lola. All right. Oh, he's taking it. Good. So now I'm going to wash my hands because we like to model good hygiene here at the Good Acre.
And can I just say that we appreciate the lighthearted banter on a Thursday evening. So thank you, Eric, for joining us for a second. He did not sign up for this.
No, no, he didn't. He knew it was happening though. So
Yeah, I've had my work day, like most of yours, is consumed by 6 Zooms at least. So this is only the second one that involved a drink, though.
Nice. All right, so we are through 2/3 of these drinks. I want to go through this next one, which is probably the easiest of all, and leave a little bit of time for some questions. We should be wrapping up just prior to 6 p.m. So if you need to leave at that point, and again, you had a question for me that I didn't get to, please find me on social media or connect through the ladies at the Good Acre. I'm happy to answer what I can for you. But also, if you want to stay a little late, 10 past 6 or whatever, I'll be around. We can definitely get to some questions then. This last drink is called a maple old fashioned. You may have heard of an old fashioned before. This is a little bit of a fall twist and uses something that probably a lot of you have in the fridge already, which is maple syrup. So you don't need to make simple syrup for this one. Although to be true to the recipe, I will make a very quick and easy version of simple syrup using maple syrup in a second. I'll show you how to do that. That doesn't even involve, in this case, the stove. Minnesota is actually one of the best rye, the grain, one of the best rye growing states in the country. And it's because of our climate and our soil. And northwestern Minnesota is really, well, much of Minnesota is great, but northwestern Minnesota is perfect for growing rye. And so, again, I'm going to be using another local spirit here. This is Rocknar Rye, and this is also from Far North Spirits. It is 94 proof. So this is a little hotter, a little more alcohol in this than some of your standard shelf ryes. Most of those are around 90 proof, but this is some great stuff. We love Mike and Sherry Reese up at Far North Spirits. They're great people and they make a great product. So this old fashioned is going to be spirit, this rye, sugar, which is the maple syrup, simple syrup, and bitters. Again, Angostura bitters, the most common bitters out there. If you want to get real experimental, you definitely can. You can find some other bitters and try them. They will change the character of the cocktail. But experimentation is always encouraged as long as you drink what you make and don't waste any. I mentioned the how to make a simple syrup quickly and easily. In this case, because we're combining 2 liquid ingredients, what I want to do is just use boiling hot water and pour it into a measuring cup and then pour the syrup in there as well. So we're going to do a 2-to-1 ratio, 2 parts of maple syrup and 1 part of water. So it'll be an extra sweet, extra viscous, a little thicker version of simple syrup than 1-to-1. I have over here just a hot water kettle, an electric tea kettle. I'm going to set this to boil and it'll be done in about 30 seconds or so. I mentioned that we're using maple syrup. In the interest of just using what you have, this is grade A maple syrup, which is great for pancakes. Grade B maple syrup is actually better for cocktails because it does have a few more impurities in it. It's got that thicker, richer, slightly deeper, more fall-like flavor to it. But also, grade B maple syrup is sometimes hard to find. I didn't have time to look for it, so I'm just going to use grade A. The flavor overall probably won't be quite as robust as it would have been otherwise, but it's going to be good enough. While that's boiling, what I think I'm going to do here is, let's see. So I'm just going to make enough of this to put into this drink. So I'm going to keep this simple. You don't need to do a cup to a cup. Again, any amount to any amount will work. So I'm going to do 2 ounces of maple syrup. And as soon as that's done, I'm going to add 1 ounce of boiling water. And we're going to let it sit while we add the rest of the ingredients to our shaker tin, and that should be enough.
And Mike, on that rye whiskey, that's not the Cognac cask version, is it? I know Far North did a limited edition run of that.
Yep. This is finished in sherry casks. So what they did was age this in, they probably aged it in oak barrels and then added it into sherry casks to finish it for a few months. And that adds sort of an extra layer. I love this bourbon. This is one of my favorites. I'm sorry, this rye. But if you wanted to go with something that was a little lower price point, if you wanted to go with something that was a little easier to find, Rittenhouse Rye is really, really good. It's a little harder to find though. You also could do a Canadian rye, honestly. It just comes down to your personal taste. All right. So our hot water is really hot. And we will add this to our syrup here. Now I will warn you, because I have done this before, if you have a metal jigger and you're pouring boiling water into it, don't hold the part that touches the water because that hurts. So I'm holding below the middle part here.
Susan is wondering what your opinion is about Templeton Rye.
Templeton Rye is good. Templeton Rye is not, it's not a craft rye. It doesn't necessarily matter for a lot of us. A good rye is a good rye. But I will say that Templeton Rye is more expensive than it should be, given they buy their base spirit clear. So everything that comes off a distillery, is clear initially. They buy that from somebody. They don't do their own distilling. They buy it and then they finish it in their own casks. And it ends up tasting good, but it's priced at a price point that this is priced at, except they do all the work and Templeton sort of takes a shortcut. Does it taste good? Yeah. Is it overpriced and are they not being completely transparent with how they create their rye? Yeah. Good question though.
As I said in the comments, we love local around here.
I assumed this group would. All right, so this is now all come together. So we're ready to use this in our drink. And we're gonna start with this because it's relatively cheap. Now this also is in here as just a teaspoon. If you like your old fashions a little sweeter, put in a little more than a teaspoon, but I'm gonna do that skinny 1/4 ounce again. And then we're going to do 2 dashes of Angostura Bitters. And we're going to do 2 ounces of our amazing PX Sherry Cask finished Rocknar Rye from Far North Spirits. And this is it. This is the whole shebang. Very, very simple build. And fancy enough and different enough because it has that maple syrup flavor in it, that maple flavor that's going to come through, that people are going to think that you really know what you're doing and that you went all out. This is the one drink that we're making tonight that's a stirrer, not a shaker. Whenever you have citrus juice or things of different densities, you would tend to shake it. The maple syrup is borderline. It's kind of viscous and thick, but this is still a stirrer, not a shaker. So we're going to put some ice cubes in this shaking tin.
How much bitters was it?
Sorry, what's that?
How much bitters?
2 dashes. All right, so we've got some ice in here. I'm just going to pour the liquid on top of that. And we are going to stir for about 10 seconds until your, whatever you're using, your pint glass, your mixing tin, your mixing glass is cold to the touch. Now, the whole point of stirring rather than shaking is that you can slightly better control how diluted it gets. Some people might think that diluting alcohol is a waste, but the truth is that, first of all, nobody wants to drink 94 proof anything. That will burn. And second of all, water, as Scotch drinkers know, can sometimes open up and make a spirit taste even more than it would, even better than it would on its own. So that's what we're doing here. I forgot to grab this. This is a rocks glass. And I have fancy big ice cubes. You don't need these, but for all spirit drinks like this, or even a Manhattan, if you serve them on the rocks at all, I like a big rock so that it doesn't melt all that quickly. Some people would never serve an old-fashioned on the rocks. Some people want it straight up, but in this case, I'm going to do that. And then one nice thing to do here for any drink, any old-fashioned or Manhattan, is to take an orange peel, and we won't do the full horse collar, but we're going to go all the way down, top to bottom, navel to stem. And we're going to just squeeze this skin side facing out over the top of this drink. And that's going to express some orange oils. I'm going to wipe the rim of the glass with it and set it in. And again, smell is as much about, or I'm sorry, taste is as much about smell as it is anything else. And so there you have your maple old-fashioned. That is really, really good. If this is too hot for you, meaning if it's a little too spicy, you can stir a little longer. You could use bourbon in your old-fashioned, or what Parlor does, a split base. So it's not half and half, but for the purposes of argument, we'll say it's half rye and half bourbon. So in a 2-ounce drink that calls for 2 ounces of rye, you would do an ounce of rye and an ounce of bourbon, and that would bring the heat, the spicy level down a little bit on this. But that's it. Those are your 3 recipes that really sort of span a wide breadth of taste styles. None of them have more than 5 ingredients, and they're all pretty easy to make, no matter how many people come over to your house. So I do want to answer some questions. I've got another 10 minutes if I need to. I'm going to let you guys, though, Sarah and Anna, decide how best to do that. I don't mind doing a video question if somebody wants to do that either.
We had one clarifying question just on that last cocktail, Mike. Was it an ounce of rye and an ounce of the mixture, maple water mixture?
Nope. So I'm sorry, I confused that. I think I may have confused some people. The
okay.
recipe, which is forthcoming, is 2 ounces of rye, 1 teaspoon of the simple syrup, the maple simple syrup, and 2 dashes of bitters. If that's too spicy for you, break up that 2 ounces of rye and do an ounce of bourbon and an ounce of rye, because bourbon's a little smoother, a little sweeter. Or you can try stirring it longer, which will dilute it a little bit more.
Awesome. And it looks like we do have one question from Rachel, but before everybody hops off, I do first want to say thank you everyone for joining us tonight. This for me has been super fun. It's been really awesome to watch all of you follow along and participate. And it seems like everyone has been having a good time. So thank you for participating, and thank you to everybody who made a donation when they signed up. Just one last reminder, I'm going to pop it in the link or in the chat, the link to our Give to the Max Day page. Today is the last day to match your donations. We're fundraising to replenish our Farmer Relief Fund, which helps to provide grants to farmers when they face crop devastation due to natural weather events. So if you want to deepen your involvement, that's a great way. Hop on over to the Give MN page. And it looks like Rachel had a fun question for you, Mike. If you have a favorite old fashioned.
Favorite old fashioned. Well, so the truth is that I went through the trouble of going to the Mexican grocery store and making the piloncillo syrup because I really truly love the parlor old fashioned. Underrated old fashioned, for sure, would be the Red Cow and Red Rabbit old fashions. Something else to consider trying if you're looking to experiment. So the old fashioned cocktail these days is traditionally made with rye or bourbon, but an old fashioned style cocktail, you can replace the rye or bourbon with any spirit. An old fashioned just means the drink is made only of spirit, sugar, bitters, and water. And that spirit can be anything. So there are some pretty incredible rum old fashions out there. I think Hi-Hi, was that Hi-Hi, Eric, that had the rum old fashioned?
I believe so.
Yeah, so Hi-Hi in Northeast Minneapolis, they have a rum old fashioned that is pretty kick-ass too. But it's not what I think of when I think old fashioned. So there's 2 answers to your question.
Excellent. And it doesn't look like we have any other questions or comments going on in the chat. So just going to say thank you again to everybody for joining us, and we hope you had a good time. And
thanks so much to Mike. We're
yeah.
so happy to be friends with you, and that was really, really fun.
Well, I feel the same way, and thanks to everybody who took an hour out of what have been some really crazy busy days to spend the evening with us. Again, you can find me on Instagram and on Twitter at Mike Augustyniak. You can go to Facebook too, but the truth is that I'm seriously considering deleting my Facebook page because I don't like Facebook as a company. So I don't post much there, but the other two.
Not as hot of a take as it used to be, probably.
No, I know, right? Yeah, like everybody's raising their hand, shaking their head. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, we did have one other question, Mike. That was a beautiful goodbye. And then someone asked, is Scotty style really an old fashioned?
Yeah, absolutely. Scotty style. That's sort of what the parlor old fashioned is based on. It's bringing together sort of the traditional rye old fashioned and the Wisconsin bourbon old fashioned. And it's sort of splitting the difference. Both are great, but honestly, I think that splitting the difference is the best of all possible worlds.
Cool. All right.
Well, thanks so much, guys.
We'll end it there. Yeah.
Good to see y'all.
Thanks, everyone. Have a nice evening.
Bye, everybody.